but I'm going to throw it up right to the first myth here. So the first fact or myth we're going to kind of debunk and give some more factual information on is that DINP leaks or leaches or evaporates out of a final product. So I think Hendrik will throw that one to you, and let's hear more about that.
Yeah, let's really start with the chemistry that's all behind of that. It is true that the plasticizer is not chemically bound to the PVC polymer matrix. So there's always the possibility that the plasticizer or the phthalates somehow evaporates from the product, that it migrates through the PVC matrix to the surface, and that their exposure might happen. As you might maybe remember from the first episode, the chemical structure of the plasticizer defines also the technical and the toxicological properties of the plasticizers. And this also is valid for the movement of the plasticizer through the polymer matrix and into the air. Especially low molecular weight plasticizers like DEHP or BBP, because of their chemical structure with the shortened chain length, they evaporate and migrate more easy than the high molecular weight phthalates like DINP or DINP. Sometimes even by factor of 400, there is 400 times less movement of high molecular weight phthalates compared to the low molecular weight phthalates. So that's just a technical fact. On the other side, let's talk about what really a risk is. If you might already know, risk is defined by the combination of exposure and hazard of a product. So if something is not hazardous, you can be exposed to a lot of this stuff without any risk. The other way around, if something is hazardous, there is not a risk if you take care of the exposure. Especially with the myth of DINP leaking, evaporating from the product into the air, and by this creating a risk to human or to nature, I can say clearly that there is no risk at the end, because DINP is neither hazardous nor is there a relevant exposure, because the migration and the evaporation is really, really low and 5 times lower than of lower molecular weight phthalates. So at the end, there is no risk of using DINP in its current application.
So there's no risk of DINP leaking or leaching out of a product based on the technical properties of DINP.
No, there is, of course, the possibility that DINP leaches out of the product, but there is no risk behind happening this, because DINP is not hazardous, so it is not a toxicological risk to be exposed to DINP in such low doses, and there's also evaporation not to such a great amount that it could pose a risk, because the evaporation is limited by the chemical nature of DINP. There is always an equilibrium between DINP in the substrate and DINP in the air. And this is a fixed equilibrium that cannot be more DINP above a certain level of saturation, just because of that's a technical or a chemical fact. And the level of DINP that you could, in the worst case, reach in a room where you don't have any movement of air, this level of saturation is so low that is no risk at all. So yes, there might be some evaporation, as everything is in an equilibrium state with the air, but this level of DINP in the air is without any risk.